صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Irfan. Thank you very much. Wa jazakallahu khair. And keep continuing to nurture your good spirit and your beautiful voice along with it. We need it. Okay, Juwaria is here. Okay, and she's connecting. I'll let her come on as well. All right, As-Salaamu Alaikum, Juwaria.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Okay, this is just to introduce. This is Sister Juwaria, and I had the barakah of teaching to and learning from her some years ago when I worked at El Fatih Academy in Reston. And Juwaria, I could speak about her as well as speak about you as much as I know, but you all have an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Well, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First of all, thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate it. I want you to consider this session as informal. It's formal, but it's informal. I'm calling it informal because what is needed from you needs to have less structure, but more spirit, more honesty, more freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of what you're feeling. So it's informal and formal simultaneously. So again, thanks for responding. You recall a month or so ago when I requested you to respond to the survey, 8 of you did. 6 sisters and 2 brothers. And I have their names right here, and I'll mention them as we go forward. So we had 8 actual responses if I have copied them correctly, and I believe I did. Some of you may know that there is a group of us, a group of brothers and now sisters for the past 3 or 4 weeks. We hold a Zoom session every Sunday between 4 and 5. We started between 1 hour, 4 and 5, and now it's grown to 4 to 5:30, 90 minutes. And we have been doing this for 18 straight weeks, alhamdulillah, consecutive. And the number of participants who join us, we started with 4 of us. Early on, back in February or March, I can't remember, I used to, after Salatul Fajr, I would go to my apartment balcony and I would make a little recording as the sun was rising, and I'd make a few statements. And some brothers and people, they liked it. They liked what was said. And they said, you know, we should come together as a group and expand these expressions and moments. So we started with 4. And today we still have 4 of us who are really responsible for planning our Sunday sessions. But for example, yesterday, Sheikh Abdul Jalil was our guest speaker via videotape, and there were 28 participants in that forum. Last Sunday, it was 39 participants in that forum. And every week, brothers and sisters who attend, and I should tell you, you are invited if you wish. It's an open session. It's been fantastic, particularly now that we're virtually in some kind of ways imprisoned within our own homes due to COVID-19. So the opportunity for a number of us to come together to have when we have guest speakers, religious scholars, medical people, community activists. We've had a range of people, and all of them essentially are old guys and girls like me, the one you're looking at, the old folks, right? But it's been beautiful, and some of the young adults have joined us as well, and it's been fantastic. Now, you're probably wondering why did I request a survey and how it's of utmost use to us. Well, here's the issue. Old people like me, 68 years old, 60, I've got friends in their 70s, 50s. And unlike me, my children are all in their 40s, but we have friends who have children in the 20s, upper teens, grandchildren, and there's a lot going on. And as you well know, since George Floyd was murdered by that police officer, that triggered an explosion in this country, a social explosion that still hasn't died out. People are reacting, protesting, making demands, so forth around the country. Black Lives Matter has come to the fore and other issues. And with all of this happening, we adults, the ones I have access to, and we knew it before, but it's more punctuated now, and that is, we really don't know what's in the heart and minds and thoughts and hopes and fears of young adults like you, and some who are younger than you. Not so much the ones 12 or 10, although being more familiar with what they're thinking and feeling is useful, but we're really focused on your peer group. This is why the survey targeted your peer group. So what we need, and when I say we, I'm talking about the people who are convening these Sunday sessions and by extension others. We have discovered that we really don't know what's going on in your peer group. We see you, we love you, we respect you, we know some of you, we admire you, but we don't really have a clue. And that was really spelled out in the words of some of our presenters. For example, we've had African American brothers who work in communities in Baltimore and Southeast Washington, and they really tell us some of the stories that young people are tragically going through. And they're major. Some of these people are Muslims, some are non-Muslim, but the age group and the experiences are very similar, and they're heartbreaking. And one brother who's working with a similar age group, he made a comment in one of our presentations, I guess it was presentation 15, because yesterday was Sunday session 18. He said sometimes, like if some brother is 50 years old and he wants to help some young brother who's pretty much in the streets, and that person is 18, 19, 20, the first thing he'll say to the elderly brother, say, you know, how old are you, man? And so if the brother says, I'm 55, or I'm 62, or like me, 68, then the younger brother will say, man, I don't want to hear from you. You don't know what I'm going through. I don't even want to even talk to you. So this has drove us to the point that we really not only need to hear you, but we need to listen to you. So we have scheduled today an hour for us if we need to go over, and you have time, I have time, but I don't want to oppress you, because I know you guys are great students and you've got fantastic schedules and you're disciplined and organized, and I'm not going to interfere with your wonderful schedules, right? But what I'd like us to do is kind of do like a round table. I'll ask a few questions and you respond as precisely and succinctly as you can. But remember, it will only be of use to the objective that I and others have in mind, is that you're sharing your heart with us. It won't be of great use if it's just something very surface and remote, something you may be exposed to or heard. No, we want to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to ask you the first question, and then whoever wants to speak first, please do so. And the first thing I would ask is, how are you coping with COVID-19? Whoever wants to answer or respond. Speak from your heart,
Ben?
please.
So quarantine has been kind of different throughout like the months, because at the beginning, obviously I was really excited that the spring break had been extended. So that was great. I had a very good break. And then once Ramadan came around, it was both good and difficult, because usually during Ramadan, what makes it so amazing is that we get to have iftar with our friends and family. We get to spend time with each other. We get to go to the masjid to pray together. And that's always been a big part of it for my family, at least. In my community. So it was really difficult to be alone during Ramadan. But what was great about it was that because we had so much time at home, it definitely gave a lot of time to reflect on ourselves, gave a lot more time to do more than we usually would in terms of prayers and stuff like that. So that was great. And then after Ramadan, quarantine started to get a little bit difficult, because I was basically staying inside all day. It was difficult for me to stay motivated with my schoolwork, and with my schedule at home. It was really easy to sort of procrastinate a lot and be lazy about a lot of things. And it was also kind of depressing, even though I am definitely more of an introverted person, and I like to be alone. It was definitely kind of scary and depressing for it to go on for that long. And it was pretty bad for my mental health for a while. But then afterwards, I started connecting with a lot more of my friends. We started having Zoom meetings more often. I made myself a schedule finally. And so then things got better progressively. And so that's where I'm at now.
Okay, thank you so much, Amira, for sharing that. And,
Okay.
Who's next?
So I'll be honest, it's been kind of depressing for me, because I do love going places with my family, and the fact that I don't have that freedom now, being stuck inside the house, it is kind of depressing. I think this quarantine really taught me about the things that I took for granted. Like, I remember going to college when I didn't have a car. I would always complain about not having a car, wish I could, get to places easily. But now, I just wish that that I could just go outside for a walk, So just simple things like just taking a walk, it's just really taught me that, wow, I took something like this for granted, and now I have to constantly, be inside the house and not even see a ray of sunshine. So, my siblings have been keeping me busy, with their online schoolwork. So, but I don't know how much patience I can hold, because they are kids and they can be annoying sometimes. But overall, I mean, I'm learning a lot of new things about myself. So, I guess that's that.
Okay, thank you, Afat, for sharing. Okay, next.
I think just to bounce off of what was said previously, yeah, this definitely is a challenging time that no one could have really, I think, predicted. And so for me, I think one thing I noticed about the COVID-19 and when the lockdown was starting was that it was really a test of some of my deepest fears, we're all attached to our family and friends, and there are special people in all of our lives, I'm sure, that we worry about. And so for me, I noticed that, with this pandemic, I started to worry a lot more about losing people that I love. And that's, in the beginning, I think that was very difficult because I just did not know how I was going to cope with that fear. But I don't know, it seems like maybe we're adjusting kind of to the new fears and anxieties that we're being exposed to. At this point, I wouldn't say I'm thriving during the pandemic. I would say I'm surviving. Alhamdulillah, I have it much better than a lot of people. So that's what I keep reminding myself of. And yeah, I think it's like a survival mode as we try to figure out ways to cope and how to live with the new normal, at least for the next several months, it looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Juwadia. Since the other 5 of us know each other, and Juwadia, this is the first time they're meeting you, why don't you, I know you've just recently graduated from the university, but why don't you brief so they can become a little more familiar with you? Why don't you share with them what your course of study was? And congratulations on that degree.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Juwaria. I just graduated from George Mason University last May. I have a degree in global affairs with a concentration in human security. I also did a minor in neuroscience. And I don't know if Brother Salahuddin would even remember this, but actually in 8th grade, a little before our graduation, he gifted me a book about a neurologist. And I don't know, maybe that played a role. It was only recently that I even remembered that I had read this book about this neurosurgeon, and I was fascinated. So anyways, it's interesting because global affairs and neuroscience are very different things. I'm planning, inshallah, on doing my master's degree, also in global affairs. I have an interest in public health, and that's kind of where I would like to take my career and my future plans. So inshallah, we'll see.
Okay, thank you. And I think Nadia Rugani, you're at George Mason as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you and Juwadia and all the rest of you have to make a sisterhood, a friendship. Don't make this as a one-time exchange. We're all sisters and brothers in Islam, and right now we really need our shared communication with each other, considering all of the constraints we're coping with. So thanks for sharing that, Juwadia. Okay, who's next? Irfan, come on now.
Sure, I'll go.
All right.
So, alhamdulillah, it's definitely been easier for me than some other people, since none of my family members or people whom I know, were affected by the COVID as far as their health goes. So there was no worries on that side. And I think I coped pretty well to it, and I didn't really feel much of well, I definitely felt the change, but it wasn't a problem, I guess. So I just tried to find new opportunities within it that I could take advantage of, whether it was having more time at home and things that I wish I had done before and I never had the time to. So that was definitely a nice plus, and also spending time with family. That was also great. And more on the global side, it was interesting to me how the world kind of came together and responded to this pandemic, and observing that, it was definitely a life learning experience, viewing how the world responded to this.
Okay. Anything more, Irfan? All right,
No.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irfan. Okay, Nadia.
Thank you so much, brother, first of all, for putting this call together and giving us a chance to voice our thoughts.
Alhamdulillah.
So in terms of coping, it's definitely been very new and challenging at times. I guess, adjusting to this new situation where we have to be at home all the time. I think that COVID has been a test for some youth, especially because a lot of the times home is where we are tested, especially if there are family issues, you know, things that happen at home that you kind of just want to get out and go to school and find some relief there. For those of us who do deal with that, it's definitely been a test. But on the other hand, there's been a lot more time for introspection. I think Amira mentioned that as well. More time with family, more time to be grateful for the things that we could do before. And I think one of my family members mentioned this. She was like, I'm so grateful that at least we get to stay in our homes and we're not like refugees where we're being told to go out of our homes and find a new home, or like a natural disaster hasn't forced us to leave our homes, and instead we're being asked to stay in our homes. So I guess that's a blessing in itself, and it was just very interesting to put that into perspective.
Very important, very important to have that perspective. And thank you for sharing that, all 5 of you. If there's anything else that came to mind with respect to that particular question, if you want to share it before I go to the next question. Okay, great. Okay, the second question is, with all of what's happening with the COVID-19 and the constraints, and as Ifat said, it would be nice to take a walk, go outside, kind of all of those things that all of us hopefully will have the barakah of participating in. My question to you now is, with all of that happening, what's your vision going forward in your personal life? What are you seeing? Because there's a lot happening in so many different levels. I don't want to mention what they are because that may taint your thoughts. And I really want to hear from you. We really, as I said, need to hear from you. But obviously, you know that there's so much going on. It's like the world is kind of exploding in so many different ways. So what's your vision? What do you see? What are you feeling? What's your thoughts? That's the question. One of you. You want to reverse the order on this question? Okay, if we reverse the order, Irfan, I think we have to go to you. I mean, Nadia, with you.
So vision in like a personal way, like personal goals, or?
Well, what are you seeing? Because we heard words like depression, depressing, challenging, and all of that. And sometimes some of these feelings, they can gain a foothold in us, even when we're not in that moment. And so very often the thing that excavates us up out of those, if we call them momentary conditions or temporary conditions, is our vision. What are we seeing? Because that gives us the energy to overcome the moment. So what are you seeing for yourself? Not only for yourself, but what are you seeing for the broader world? Because COVID-19 is a global affair. It's not just a Virginia or Maryland or Washington, D.C. affair. What do you see?
That's true. I think when it comes to things like depression and other things that discourage us in this time, it's really important to just have that tawakkul in Allah and know that nothing will happen unless He wants it to happen. And as bad as COVID is, and as much of a change it has made in all of our lives and kind of threw things off, it is part of His plans in the end. So knowing that He's in charge of it and he will be in charge of when it's over, is kind of reassuring. I think in terms of going forward, post-COVID, hopefully, one thing that I would say is a vision is a more united ummah. So an ummah that's prepared to act. And I think that starts at a community level. So hopefully, once we're able to congregate again and once COVID subsides, we'll get to work on starting to build our communities more. I think this time of being isolated and being in our homes has made us be able to appreciate what we used to have in our masjid communities. And I think our focus needs to go toward building them and building a place where youth can be educated and be included. And yeah, in general, just building stronger communities, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Nadia, for sharing that. I'm trying to take notes at the same time as listening to you. So if you see my eyes kind of looking down, I'm trying to keep up with your words and hear you as best I can. So thank you so much. So Irfan, I think we're back to you.
Brother, I'm still organizing my thoughts. Would it be possible that someone else goes?
Okay, please.
Thank you.
Amira, Juwairia, Ifat.
I'll go.
Okay.
Basically, this is kind of piggybacking off of what Nadia was talking about, but one thing that definitely that I felt throughout this pandemic was that nothing is in our control, and that, like Nadia said, everything happens for a reason. It was really interesting to see how the entire world reacted to this one virus and how it affected all of us, even if we, weren't diagnosed with the virus. And that was really interesting to see, especially because it didn't matter what your status was, it didn't matter where you were from, it didn't matter who you were. Everyone was affected by this problem. And so I think in terms of the future, what is important to understand is that we're not in control of anything and anything can happen. And like Nadia said, it's really important at the community level, for us to be more connected after this, for us to open our eyes to what really matters and, why we should be together during this difficult time. Things are getting difficult every day. There's so many things happening. This year has been so chaotic. It's crazy. It'll definitely be one for the history books. And yeah, just like Nadia said, I think it's really important that the Muslim Ummah in particular, gets their priorities straight and works together, because I know a big problem is that there are so many reasons that people can come up with to sort of separate us and to create all of these different groups that are not, on the same page. And during this time of difficulty and struggle for everybody, regardless of their race, their status, it's really important for us to come together and understand what really matters to us. And so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Amira. Okay, next. Juwairia.
Yeah, so these are all very beautiful answers. And I feel like that in listening to you and reflecting on what you all were saying, I maybe started to drift away from the question in my own mind because I was just wrapped up in what you all were saying. So just to confirm, so you're asking about ways to move forward with this pandemic?
Yeah, ways to move forward. But yeah, as you see it, I mean, the vision, what do you see coming out of this period that we're in? As Amira mentioned, the world has had to accept the reality that we humans are powerless and we basically making sujood to COVID-19. But with all of that, as she said, that's happening, these many things, we still are holding on to a vision. And so the question is, what's that vision? What's the vision for you? What are you seeing?
So I think I started with a very individual vision. I think at the start of this pandemic, it really forced me to really look inward and do a lot of self-reflection. I found this lecture very inspiring. I think it was somewhere at the start of the lockdown, maybe back in March or so. There was this lecture by Dr. Yasser Qadhi, and he was reflecting on the pandemic and what it means and how do we reconcile what's happening with our religion. And something that he said really stuck with me. He was reflecting on the pervasiveness of fahasha on earth right now, like just the mindless and shameless sinful activities that occur on a global scale, and that where once in history maybe there was some shame attached to some of these actions, now it's just mindless and pride associated with sin, you know. And you know, I really was reflecting on that, and it made me think that this is a good time. This is like the best time to turn to Allah in repentance and tawbah, just make a lot of tawbah, because if not now, then when, you know? So at an individual level, I think I really realized, and I'm trying to implement this, is that this is a time for me to turn back to Allah, to ask for forgiveness for my part in any sin or in any evil at any level. And I think it would be so nice, I mean, this is a bit of an idealistic vision, but if everyone just started to do a bit more of that, just individual reflection, you would have all of these little pockets of light around the world, and then slowly it would grow to encompass the entire world in light. If everyone just started to turn back to the purpose that we were created for, you know, which is to worship Allah, to be humble before Allah. We've lost so much of that humility. And I think that this virus is, one of the purposes for it being sent was to teach us how humble we should be, that we're nothing. Allah sends one microscopic thing that we can't even see, and it brings the whole world to a screeching halt. So who am I to be arrogant, you know? So I think that was definitely something that I really started to think about. And so if moving forward we can all be humble, you know, as individuals, if more world leaders can practice humility, then I think we'll be able to emerge out of this in a better situation than what we entered. So it seems a bit idealistic, so I don't want to make it a depressing vision that, you know, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen, but at least we can try.
Okay, thank you. No, that's not a depressing vision. No, you know, in these dark hours, I mean, you juxtapose darkness with light, and we need light. One of my friends, good friends, longtime friends, I invited him to my house despite the COVID-19, he and his wife, to come over, and they could sit in my house, and we can sit 10, 15, 20 feet apart, drink a cup of tea, shout at each other, and then go, and he can go back home. But he declined, and he said, well, thank you, Brother Salah, for inviting me, but I think under this condition, it's probably good not to come. Maybe we can get together later, because I feel like, these are his words, he said, I feel like I'm in the sunset of my life. That's the word he used. And this particular person has had some medical challenges in recent years. And I really don't know if that statement of sunset is a reflection of how he's feeling with respect to his health and his future. And even he mentioned, because he wrote this to me, he said, in connection with sunset, he said, the sunset is setting, and the al-akhirah is basically what his vision is, what he's seeing. So That's what I mean by what are we seeing? What's the vision? Because I know some of us want to break loose. It's like a jailbreak, you know, when we're going to break loose. And a lot of the things that Joaria just mentioned, and Amira, and all of you are mentioning about Toba and reflection and begging for forgiveness and freeing ourselves from arrogance. I think once we break free, if I can use that phrase, a lot of things may be lost. The things we're gaining now, they may dissipate because the constraints are no longer there. So we have to be mindful of that. But Irfan, are you ready?
Yeah, well, I think everyone so far has mentioned great points, and I think what you just complimented was also great. So on a global scale, as far as societies and countries go, and like someone mentioned, for global leaders, considering that the outlook towards the world that on a globe exists today is mostly materialistic, I think the main effects will be maybe at a materialistic level again, whether it be what happens to the economy and how countries prepare to be prepared for the next outbreaks and these sort of things. But I think for us Muslims who have a different outlook, then I think this is where we can really come and make real use of this, and both on a community level and an individual level. So being isolated and kind of reflecting, as many of us have mentioned so far, has given us a chance to kind of seek more and spark that something that maybe is in us that now we want to, do something, or we want to get out, whether it's serving Allah in different ways, right? The servitude that we want to have, whether it's how we work with our communities, how we want to serve our communities, or even on a lower level, parents and friends. And I think once the COVID is over, it's the communities and the individual's job to manage this energy that's getting back up in the right direction, so that now that all of us have reflected, all of us do want to do more. A lot of times not starting things is about just not taking action. And when you, like you mentioned, brother, I think your example was a great example. You said there was 4 of us and we just started doing it, and then it took off. So I think this energy that exists, which is a potential energy, can be directed to just starting doing stuff, and that can lead to many great things.
Thank you, Irfan. Excellent response. I'm just trying to keep up with your notes. I should have designated one of you as the official note keeper, but rather than you do that, I need to hear from you. So if you read anything in the notes that is not quite accurate, you have to hold me responsible, because I'm trying to do the best I can. Okay. Okay, I'll leave it there. Okay. Did I hear from you?
No.
Okay, I'm waiting. Come on.
So I mean, everybody made such great points. I don't know if my point will make it up to the par, but I guess for me, I've been kind of looking at this situation from a different point, from the point of humanity. I just feel like this whole year in general just really showed people's true colors, because the fact that we were fighting over toilet paper, it just amazes me how humanity just reacted to this. And as Joy.
Looks like something happened to Ifat. Ifat, are you there? Okay, maybe she lost her connection. Maybe it'll come back. Okay, I'll leave that there. Oh, Ifat, you back? No, she's gone. Okay. Great so far. We're moving along. Is everyone comfortable with what you've stated so far? Any revision necessary? Editing, expanding, shrinking? Everything's good? Okay. Let's go to my next question. And I kind of, and probably now is good. Let me share with you, okay, if that is back with us, coming back. Okay, maybe I'll give her a chance to resume.
Sorry, brother. I think my screen froze, so
Okay, that's
why.
okay. Okay, do you want to continue? I have your notes. You said you feel like this entire year has shown people's true colors. You gave the example, for example, people fighting over toilet paper.
I just feel like humanity as a whole, like the aspect of accountability is what I really took away, especially after George Floyd's murder. It's it's really pushed people to think and to look at our world and how people are controlling it and how people are, driving it. And because, we see things on the news, such horrendous things on the news, but people just pass by it like it's nothing. But now, people are really like looking into it and thinking and speaking up about it. And I feel like that's what I really want to do. I want to speak up more in the future. I want to like look at the people in my life and see how they are affecting me, and hold myself accountable.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ifat. I appreciate that very much. And sharing, I should share with you that listening to you, all of you, and taking the notes, and then once we're done, then I have to go back and absorb all of what you said. So right now I'm cerebral. I'm just, I'm taking in and processing. Is here, but now I've got to do a meltdown later to put it all together. So I should have been smart and hired me a note taker, secretary. But I'm trying. Okay, here's the next question. Let me share this with you. One of the things that caught our attention, we have something called the Islamic Schools League, and it's an organization, it's kind of an umbrella organization that makes room for Muslim schools, Muslim educators globally to share information, ideas, practices, etc., with each other via the internet. They have something called the IECN, and many of us for years have exchanged thoughts via that organization. So a young Muslim brother, he posted something on that particular site. This is it. Some of the language is a little vulgar, and I'm not going to violate your purity by using his words, but you'll get the idea of his feeling. And I'm gonna kind of skip a few places, but he poured his heart out. And remember, I said that's what we want from you today, so that when I share this conversation with others, I want to be able to say, this is what they told me that came from their innermost being. This is what he wrote. Said an exclusive, an insight into the mind of a 15-year-old Muslim in the West. He says, Salams, I'm 15 years old, and I'm trying to be good to Allah and my parents. It's so hard. I wanted to talk about many things that come in my way when I try to do the right thing. He said, at school, you have to be a certain way, or you just cop it, and be the odd one out. He says, Wallah, if you're not with the boys who have girlfriends, then you're a knob. Never heard of that word. And you got to be known for something else, like sports, footy, or something, or MMA or boxing. If you're not, then you're automatically with the gamers. And if you're not with the gamers, you are a loner and have nothing in common with anyone, and you are a target. Even gamers can be a target anyways. He said, trends come and go. You see boys who are religious one week turn up the next Monday with mushroom haircuts and skateboards in their hands. The other day, I found out boys I know are smoking weed now, and Muslim girls are buying from the same dealer and using clear eye drops so when they go home, they don't get bashed by their mom. This, I think this young man is in Australia. He said, there's a hijabi I used to see at school, and I think, man, when I get older, I want to ask for her hand. Next minute, she's on my feed with this guy and talking about how no one can judge her. Yesterday, my friend told me some of the girls, and I'll leave that out, and their dads are known at the masjid and have big beards. Most of my friends lost, I'll leave that out. No one's real. Everyone's trying to be somebody they're not. The girls are trying to be dancers and models on TikTok, and the guys are trying hard. I only found out what all of this stuff means recently. He said, if you know and talk to the girls on Insta, then they start calling you gay. He said, TikTok is where you try to pick up. And when you're not on TikTok, you got to be sharing some other things that I won't mention. He said, I forgot to mention that I go to an Islamic school in Sydney. The problem is that Islam is just a side thing there. And everyone takes religious classes as a bludge. And it's all stuff we learn as kids. The school only cares about our grades and wanting us to fit in with society. I also don't get how we can be proud Aussies when it seems the media hates us and the police pick on us. I just read a post about how Australia fought the Ottoman Empire, so this still confuses me. I tried once, just one time, to tell my friends, come to talk at the masjid, and they laughed at me. I told my family I feel depressed, and they want me to see a psychologist. I barely even see my parents. They're always at work, always doing their own thing. And all of my siblings, all of them have problems. It's all getting to me. And I admit it's tempting to try to find a friend, but I keep reminding myself, and he's talking about a female friend. I keep telling myself it's haram. And one day I'll get married. He said, but I plan to get married when I finish year 12 because waiting until university is too long. And then he says, I try to be religious. I'm skipping over a little. He says, I try to be religious and watch Mufti Mink sometimes, but he makes everything sound so easy, and it's hard to find motivation to pray or to control my haram thoughts. I like reading the articles on this page because it reminds me that I'm not alone and that the world has become a corrupt place. I'm not a fan of the Muslims who normalize everything and tell us to fit in with everyone because deep down, I know it's not right. I feel like I'm drowning sometimes, that soon I'll just become like the other boys. I know Allah forgives all sins, and that makes me feel better, even if I slip up. At least Allah will be there for me. Finally, it's hard to summarize all my thoughts, but I guess you could say I'm just lonely, and I feel like a stranger. Too tough. He said, it's hard to summarize all of my thoughts. I'll just leave it there. With that reading. So, tell me, 68-year-old man, and you hear this young 15-year-old Muslim crying out. Where did we go wrong? Now, we're not interested in parent bashing, imam bashing, community bashing. We're not bashing. We're here to learn, to be honest and open. So a young man like this who's crying out, is it anything that could be done? Because if he's crying out, others are crying out somewhere, maybe near, maybe far, but they're us. They're us. So tell me, where did we go wrong? We meaning my age group, my parental responsibility, the community by extension. Where did we go wrong in your opinion, and what do we need to do about it? And I shouldn't ask that question by saying where did we go wrong? Maybe we didn't go wrong. Maybe we're perfect.
If it's okay, I'd like to go first.
Please, Nadia, go right ahead.
So, first of all, I had heard this letter read aloud to me previously because my mom is a principal, and so she follows on Facebook and stuff a lot of accounts that have to do with like Muslim youth and stuff. So she had actually read this to me, and the details that you didn't mention, I understand why you didn't, but it's all the more impactful, definitely, reading the full text and knowing what this young brother had to say. So when you started crying, definitely relatable to me as well, because I was very disturbed after hearing that. And I just felt so sorry for this boy, that he feels that he's so alone in a society where God and religion are kind of swept aside, and it's very difficult for him to find people that relate to him. So it was definitely hard to hear that, and for a few days I was actually pretty disturbed after reading that. In terms of responding to it and what I think maybe like what we could do, I think the problem is truly rooted in Western society, unfortunately. Many of us know that many parts of Western society are toxic. And to youth, fitting in and social inclusion is very important. Not even just to youth, but to everybody, because it's very difficult to be alone. As you can see, the boy sounds very down and not mentally well. So it's very difficult to isolate yourself. And at the same time, if you want to fit into a group or find a good friend group, you need to kind of be like them. So it's a very difficult battle that us Muslim youth face. And I think it kind of ties back into community building and having a space where we have friends like us, and where we can recognize that Islam truly is the best way of life, and what makes Islam actually the best way for somebody who's young to adjust to the world. So essentially, I think we need to really recognize why Islam is the best for us. And if we truly knew Islam, we would not turn to things that Western society offers us, and would be able to be confident in our own friend groups and our own values.
Thank you, Nadia, but I'm going to ask you a question. You know, in his letter, he mentioned about listening to Mufti Mink, and he said how Mufti Mink makes things seem so easy, and in his reality, it's not. So considering what you said about you know, the toxic nature of Western society in so many areas, and we know that, and how it's making things very challenging for any person who really cares about Allah and wants to be with Deen. What does he need? Why is he at that point, considering he's only 15? So I mean, so he's, you know, he's grown he's grown and growing in an adult responsible world. He talked about the busyness of his parents. So what would you say to him if you could meet him face to face, in light of what you just mentioned?
So it's really difficult because it's just such a deeply rooted issue. I feel like when an issue is part of society and a kid is growing up in that society, it's really hard to kind of talk to them about this because it's all around them. It's what they're surrounded with, and it feels like there's no other option. But if I were to speak to him, I would say that you're not alone, and there are youth just like you who see what's wrong with this way of life and want to live with our Islamic values. But yeah, I really need to think more about that. Like, what would I say to him? What would I suggest to him? Because honestly, it's very difficult, especially if he feels that no one is there for him to relate to, like no other friends get him. That's very difficult.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. Who's next? We're back to the this is when you need to help us, help my generation. Some a little younger, obviously a little older. Help us to help you, but we have to know where you are. This young 15-year-old brother, he poured his heart out. He didn't hold anything back. And as Nadia said, she's read the entire or heard the entire speech, but I didn't want to violate your sanctity by mentioning some of what he mentioned. So I didn't want to do that. But I think if your imagination expands a little bit, you can get pretty much where he went. So help me.
Can I go next, brother?
Please.
So one thing that I wanted to mention is that we are really lucky to have grown up. At least I was really lucky, I think, to have grown up in this area, which is so diverse, and to have actually gone to MCS, which I think was an amazing school that has taught me so much. And I was able to meet people who, you know, might not have been like the same Islamic denomination as me, but I was able to, you know, connect with them. And like, I remember talking to a lot of my relatives about my school, and they would always tell me about how like they've never heard of a community where, you know, Shia and Sunni kids would come together and learn. And so going back to the article and the boy's story, I was really surprised to hear him mention that he had attended an Islamic school and it still faced all of these issues. And just like Nadia said, it is definitely deep-rooted in society. And I think that one of the main reasons why he's having this dilemma is because he's being faced with two very different extremes in a sort of way. Not to say that Islam is extreme in any way whatsoever, but I think that he's kind of making that assumption up in his mind just because of how different each society is, essentially. I think one thing that's really important for young kids, even though that I know that it's not easy for everybody because not everyone is granted with understanding parents or parents who are always, you know, there for them or have time for them. But I think an important thing that he needs to do, and I think is a responsibility for his parents, is to really sit down and talk to them about what he's going through, because it's having parents who, you know that you're being heard from your parents is a really important thing, I think, especially for somebody who's so confused. I think it's important for him to at least have clarity in his home life, and to at least have somebody that he can talk to, that's not necessarily just the internet. And I was also really devastated when I heard this article, because he seems so angry and hurt. And I can definitely relate to some parts about how, you feel like you have to change a part of yourself to integrate into a different community, especially because at least all of us here, I think, went to a Muslim school at some point of our lives and then had to integrate into a bigger society, whether it be college or university or a public school. And I definitely think that all of us have faced the dilemma of, I have to change my personality now. I have to change this part of myself now in order to fit in, which is really devastating. But I think that in regards to this voice situation, the society itself is really difficult to change in terms of the school I'm talking about, or general Western society. It's difficult to change that, but I think that it's the responsibility of the Muslim community to really address the issue of this young boy, because that's somewhere where his voice should be heard. That's somewhere where he should be granted a platform to talk about the things that he's struggling with. And so in terms of things that you can actually do that are tangible, I think maybe holding workshops where, Muslim youth come together and they talk about the issues that they're dealing with. Workshops where they talk about their experiences at school and, how they have to sort of change a part of themselves, or how they feel like they have to change a part of themselves to fit in. I think that talking about these things is really important. And mental health is not something that's always taken very seriously in the Islamic community, which is something that needs to change, especially during this time. And so, yeah, I definitely think that it's the responsibility of the Islamic community to help this child rather than, trying to change Western society, because realistically, I just don't think that that is possible from an individual level.
Thank you, Amira. And all of what you've said, both of you, thus far is so mature. Thank you. You're helping me a lot. Who's next?
I can
If
go.
okay, come on.
So,
By the way, it's about 3:08, so I don't want to violate your time. But if you agree, how about let's do this? We'll end at 3:30. If you can hold on for another 22 minutes, and that way everybody will be free to resume whatever you have to do. Is that okay?
yeah.
We can make it that far? Okay. All right, please. Ifat, go right ahead.
So, for me, I feel that where we went wrong is balance and faith. So what I mean is that I feel that we as Muslims, we still haven't found that balance yet. I remember in the car when I used to carpool with you, you told me, brother, that we as Muslims, we should be the best version of ourselves within our boundaries, but also pushing those boundaries without breaking them. So obviously as Muslims, we have restrictions, but it doesn't mean, we can't manage that. And I feel like the Muslim community now, and especially the Muslim youth, we haven't understood that balance yet. I'll admit it myself. I haven't found that balance either. Sometimes I do look at other people and ask myself, why is this so wrong? they are doing it, why can't I do it? And I feel like that's where the disconnect is because we haven't pushed ourselves to learn, why is it wrong? Why is this haram? I feel like we're not questioning ourselves enough. And while it is the responsibility of the Muslim community, I feel like as an individual, we need to take responsibility as well. And also, I feel like we have lost a bit of faith in the religion of Islam itself and lost faith in Allah because we don't seem to trust his words anymore in a way. Like, yeah, we say, oh, Allah, Allah is the great, he's the greatest, he's the best, but do we actually reflect that on our actions? That's the question. So I feel like within ourselves, we need to solve this, finding the balance here, because we're not sent on this earth for no reason. It's a test, right? And I believe it's a test of balance. So, and also finding our faith and making our faith stronger. So my advice would be for him to go out and explore and see why the outer boundaries are so wrong, and to research why these things are wrong and find that balance within himself. Obviously, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, but that is the test, isn't it? So that's my thing.
No, thank you, Ifat. Very, very thoughtful, and we appreciate that. Don't, any of you, don't dismiss your own thoughts, your own feelings. Your thoughts, your feelings are reflections of your uniqueness. And one of the great basketball coaches, he used to coach Georgetown University basketball when they were a great team for decades, Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning, all these great players. He used to say on his radio program, he would say, comparisons are odious, was his phrase. So sometimes, like, we compare, oh, I'm not this, and this person is that, oh, this person's smarter than me, or this person has, no. You are unique in your own self. So don't worry about comparisons. They are odious, and odious means what? It smells. So we don't need that. So who's next?
If it's okay, I'd like to share some thoughts.
Please.
So I'm gonna apologize in advance because I don't think I have multiple reactions to the letter that you just read, and they're not very organized, so it's just gonna be a jumble. But I think one thing that stood out to me was him talking about trying to find some comfort in listening to some Islamic videos. And I think, it's painful to hear, but I think it's true that there does seem to be some sort of gap sometimes in how Islam is taught and some of the issues that people face today. What I mean by that, I think, as children are growing up, like when we were very little, maybe some of us were taught Islam in a sort of list form that, don't do this and do this. These are the things you have to do. These are the things you can't do. And the essence of a lot of the Islamic teachings that should be there were lost. So mercy, compassion, seeking Allah's love, how to gain Allah's love. I think some of that maybe was lost. I'm kind of reflecting sort of on my own experience. So for about like a year and a half, I was teaching Saturday school at my local masjid. And it was a really striking experience because so many of these young girls, they were middle school aged girls. I wasn't much older than them. I had just graduated from high school, and it was just so striking to me, some of the questions that they were coming to me with, and the disparity between their questions and the curriculum that I was provided. So many times I kind of felt like I just needed to stray away from the curriculum. I would look at it and I would think, they're not ready for this, or it's just gonna create more doubt in their mind, you know? If I'm teaching them about the fiqh of salah and wudu, and they're wondering, am I respected in Islam as a black girl? They're not going to listen to me. I literally remember that some of my students were so concerned about, you know, they were of African descent, and they were asking me, why is it that on the day of judgment the believers will have light on their face? Does that mean black people won't have light? You know, those are the questions they're coming to you with. So it's just, yeah, I think there was like this disconnect where I felt like I wasn't prepared with proper materials, proper ways to connect with these girls. And it, unfortunately, it's a source of contention sometimes between mosque administration and teachers, or people who are trying to do the right thing or trying to connect with youth. It's like, no, you have to stick to a curriculum, you have to teach, you have to get out these different things, and then we'll consider it a success. If you deliver these lists, you know, to the students, then, you know, and then test them with a final exam at the end of the year, that's great, you know. But I don't think that should not be the point. And I feel like there's a lot of, I don't think it's just my mosque, I think it's like other places too where there's this suffering. A lot of well-meaning people, again, I am not criticizing anyone, well-meaning people, mashallah, like have done so much for the community. But I think maybe it's time to reevaluate and start from the maybe grassroots, let's maybe start from the bottom up. What are students concerned about? What are youth struggling with? What are the questions that they're coming to teachers with? And then let's create curriculum per se from there. So that's just that was a reflection that I had, I think, is this young man, he has so many questions and so many issues that he's facing, and he doesn't feel like he's getting comfort or any answers from videos that he's watching. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna. That's important too. And then I'll hold off to the next question. And we've got about 13 more minutes. Okay, who's next? Who haven't I heard from? Irfan.
Yeah. So, brother, my thoughts are also kind of scattered, so I'll try to organize them in some way. But and my answer will be a mix of both the letter that you just shared with us and also what I firsthand saw and been seeing within our community and other communities. And none of the things that you mentioned in the letter were anything new to me that I've been seeing within our community or other communities. So I wasn't really as shocked as other people. Definitely every time that I'm faced with this and I think about this, whether it's a letter or within our community that I see this, it's heartbreaking, truly heartbreaking, but it didn't come as a surprise to me. So I'll try to break it down as the factors that I've realized that really play an important role. So the first one is the society at large. Specifically living in the Western society, the dominant culture and the way that it gravitates towards is very much in line with the natural desires and the nafs that we have as people. So getting pulled towards that direction is very easy. And the direction that Allah and Islam has taught us to go is the one that is actually not really emphasized on by the schools, the families, and the community at large within the Muslim community. For example, like the main thing, which I believe is one of the biggest things that is not a part of Islamic school curriculums, is Jihad al-Akbar, the jihad with your own nafs. Yes, we do learn about it in Islamic studies books, what it is and how it's better than Jihad al-Asghar, and we learn that the Prophet said the real war starts, with the Jihad al-Akbar. But did we get any practice? How did anyone set this up for us to start doing Jihad al-Akbar, to start fighting with our nafs, so that when we go out there and there are these desires for any human being, like he mentioned, whether it's the feeling towards the other gender, or whether it's being tempted to smoke or get into some circles of friends that you shouldn't be in. How have we been prepared to fight with ourselves? So I see this as one of the main things. The second thing, within the families, brother, I don't think the families themselves, in a lot of cases, are prepared to educate the children. Children come from roots within a family. And if the family has not adapted themselves well to the right Islamic principles, and if they have adopted themselves to the Western culture instead of the Islamic culture, then really it would be a tough expectation to have from the kid to now ask him, your family, and the family might be doing their prayer and doing the things like that, right, which are the basic things in Islam, but is that really the Islamic culture that we are taught and we should be following? So if the family is just at that level, you can't expect much from the kid. That would be the second thing. And I think really the kid's feelings that he's having are, they are very normal. They're very normal for someone who doesn't have the resources that he doesn't have. And for us to start fighting these is to calibrate the responses that we are having. So what we are teaching at our schools, a lot of times I've seen this again firsthand too, that we learn years of Islamic studies, whether it's through Saturday school, Sunday school, or if we are fortunate enough to go to a Muslim community school, we learn this almost on a daily basis. So we learn all the Islamic studies, and then we go out and we start having these questions that we don't have the answers to, because the things that they have taught us or we've been taught haven't been calibrated as a response to the Western world. So I've seen friends, brother, that come out of Islamic studies schools after years and years and years, and for years after they've graduated and now that they're in college, the biggest question in their mind is that I can't convince myself that God exists. And this is not one case that I've seen. This is not one or two cases, but this is a lot of cases that I've seen, that their biggest challenge is to start with convincing themselves from a philosophical level that there is a God, that Islam is the right religion. How do I know Islam is the right religion compared to Christianity? How do I know what I am doing is right? Their answers seem pretty convincing. I see, like the kid mentioned, Mufti Menk, which I've also watched him, and he gives good videos, but he also watches another, priest or someone else, and they also give pretty convincing videos. They also seem to be pretty nice on the outside. How do I know which one is the right one? So I think, not to go too much on a tangent, I think the foundational questions and the foundational roots that we should be establishing as Muslims are the ones that are undermined. And even within our centers and educations, like the other sister mentioned, it's more just like any other subject. Islamic studies or learning fiqh is just like another subject. Let me learn it so I'm proficient enough in maybe remembering it or testing the test or passing the test. But how is it calibrated to really change me and develop me as a person?
Thank you so much, Irfan. A very, very thoughtful response, and all of you are doing that. All of you have spoke to that question, right? Okay, we have 7 more minutes. Okay. What's your view, is the final question, the Black Lives Matter movement, which was existing even before George Floyd's murder? They have some years invested in their organization. I don't know how many, 4, 5, 6 years they've been around, but they become more visible since that tragedy. And you have some masjids, for example, and Muslim community centers, they're discussing what role does and should the Muslim community have, and that's all of the community, the so-called immigrant, the ones born here from all over the world, because we are ummah, we're a mixture of many things. The question is becoming, what do we have to do with Black Lives Matter? Do we have anything to do with them? They have some lesbians and gays in their organization. They drink alcohol, some of them. Most of them are not even Muslim. I mean, all of these things are being stated. And these discussions are going on in masajid. different places. There was a forum held yesterday. I think I shared it with some of you out in Prince George's County, had a Zoom session. Prince George's County Muslim community and the Black Lives Matter movement. They convened 6 or 7 panelists. I couldn't get on. I tried to get on, but I couldn't get on to see it, even though I have the link now and I can send it to any of you if you're interested in hearing what was discussed. But the question is, what role do you see for the Muslim community with respect to the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the issues that have been raised and are still being raised with association with that movement? And that'll be your final question. So who's first?
I might take the plunge here and go first. Everyone's okay with that?
Okay, come on.
So one of my reflections with the role of the Muslim community in the Black Lives Matter, I think, is to start with our own Muslim communities, because recently when I heard the statistic that Black Muslims make up about 50% of Muslims in America, I was a little sad that I didn't know that before and that it came as a surprise to me, because I think that reflects on how in certain ways Black Muslims are a little invisible in our communities. We're a very affluent community. Some of our immigrant communities are very affluent, and you have these very fancy masajid in America, and then you also have very poor mosques in America, and typically it's the African American Muslims that are attending those mosques. You have mosques in America that are in such dangerous parts of the city, and very often those are the mosques for African Americans. So you know, I'm not saying not to support the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think that's a duty for Muslims to figure out, like, okay, well, what's going to be the best way to show our support and to lend support. But I think first and foremost, we need to look at the issues in our own community of racism, systematic racism in our masjid, in our Islamic schools, and in amongst Black Muslim youth, how uncomfortable they are in their own skin, or how rejected they feel by their own communities. We have such a problem with racism and this idea that unfortunately that, you know, some Muslims, you know, from the cultural background or whatever, it's just there's this idea that you're not as beautiful if your skin is darker or something like that. And all of that is out there, and it's very pervasive, and we have these big issues of identity amongst our own Muslim youth. So I think to go back to, I think, what I said a lot earlier, to look inward and really start from there, start from our own Muslim communities. There are efforts that I think are really good of some masajid, you know, supporting other masajid financially. For example, a predominantly maybe Pakistani mosque or something who is more affluent is giving money and support to a masjid maybe in inner city Washington DC or something like that, and I think that's good, but of course it shouldn't stop there. So that's just like my humble reflection. I mean, there are people who are doing so much more than me, so it's easier to talk the talk, and there are people out there who are actually walking the talk. So I think my duty is to just be more supportive of Muslims who are trying to bring about that change in our communities that is very needed.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you very much. Okay, who's next?
I can go.
Okay, please.
So I highly agree with Joaria. You know, we need to start within our own community, because if we can't look at ourselves as equal, how are we going to look at other people as equal? And, you know, the racism with our community is just, wow. The countless of times, you know, I've heard, you know, many people, you know, using the N-word very freely. It's just very like, you know, it's just like, there's an issue. You know, why? Maybe those people don't really know the history behind it, you know? And I think that's where we need to start educating our community about things like this, and like why people have the right to be sensitive about these types of things. And again, you know, if we cannot solve problems within our own community, there's no way we will be able to solve other people's problems. And it goes to the same with like this whole Sunni Shia thing. It's, you know, it's the same thing. If you cannot look at another person that's slightly different than you, actually, no, there shouldn't be any difference. You know, we all bleed the same color, right? But, you know, we need to solve this racism within ourselves, because it's going to become a problem in the future. And, you know, again, we need to be held responsible for our own actions. And even if that means confronting others, even the people that we love, for, you know, for saying stuff like this, especially the high use of the N-word. It's very, like, very disturbing. So, I mean, it's just, I just wanted to like add on to Joaria's point, because I feel like that's where we start, honestly.
Thank you, Ifat. Thank you very much. Okay, who's next?
Could I? Sorry.
Oh, okay, you want to?
Go ahead.
No, actually, I was just asking Brother Saladin if it would be all right with you if I left. Unfortunately, I'm really enjoying this discussion, but I do have some
Okay.
housework. My mom's not feeling well, so I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. We understand. Thank you for joining us. And there may be a follow-up to this session if you all are willing, and others, because I should let you know I'm going to share this session with others. So I can't thank you all enough. Thank you, Jawaria, for joining.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you to everyone.
Yeah,
And I'm
you've
sorry
got,
for interrupting.
that's right, and you've got some new friends now. Okay, thank you so much. We'll stay in touch.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Assalamu
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Okay. Irfan, I think it was you.
Yeah. So I'm going to refer to a speech that I've listened to multiple times by Sayyid Khamenei, and this is before the Iranian Revolution, where he mentions, and he goes through the Quran and different duties that we have as Muslims, and breaks it down that our duties as Muslims and what is mentioned in the Quran, there is the disproportionate amount of emphasis on our duties towards the society rather than the other things that we think are more personal, such as like paying zakat or paying some or doing our salat and fasting in the month of Ramadan. But there is a lot much more emphasis on our duties towards the society, and those are our main duties. And to keep it short, I don't think that you could be living anywhere in the world and not see the Black Lives Matters movement and the racism that exists in the US as not your issue. So it is 100% our duty and one of the main duties upon our shoulders as Muslims.
Thank you, Irfan. I appreciate it very much. Okay, next. Who is it? Nadia?
Sure, I can go. So I really liked what Sister Joadia was saying of starting to address this issue in our own communities. Because at first, like at the beginning when the Black Lives Matter movement was becoming really like more serious on the news and stuff following the murder of George Floyd, at first I was like, oh, well, we don't have racism in our communities because just being Muslim means that you're accepting of all races. And I realized that that's actually not true, because people bring in a lot of the times their cultural backgrounds that kind of put down other races and ideas that are not really part of religion that they try to bring into it. So it definitely is a problem in our communities, and we should start there by educating ourselves, whether it's having like book clubs where we read about the issue, we read about the history of slavery and racism in the United States or around the world. I think knowing the history is really important. Yeah.
Okay. Just finishing my notes. Thank you, Nadia. Amira.
Okay, so basically I've been doing a lot of reflection about this issue because it's become, I've never really seen like the youth stand up this much before at like such a huge range. I've seen like so many protests all over the world, not only in the United States. The death of George Floyd definitely triggered something. And there's been a lot of things on social media. And one thing that I've definitely learned about myself is that even though, just like Nadia said, we are in a Muslim community, so many of us have actually contributed to the problem. And, you know, Muslims that are not Black people of color, I've seen with my own eyes, have been almost just as discriminatory against Black people as, you know, so many of the videos that we see online of, you know, white people who are, you know, slurring at African Americans. I watched this video online that Hassan Minhaj did. He's a comedian. He's Indian and Muslim. And he basically made a short video in response to this whole the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement in response to it. And he started off by saying that, and this also applies to me, and I definitely related to this because I am part of the South Asian Muslim community, is that there is so much racism within our own communities, within even, you know, South Asian people who are of a darker color. There's so much racism within our community. It's intertwined with so much of our culture, and it's frankly so disgusting. Like in India, I know one of the best-selling products for women is a skin whitening product, a skin whitening cream called Fair and Lovely, and that's, you know, been one of the most popular things that's advertised on the media in India and all over the South Asian region. And, you know, there's so much discrimination even within our own communities. Hassan Minhaj mentioned this, and I've actually seen, you know, a lot of my extended family talk this way, which is devastating. But we call African American people Gala, which basically means Black, and it's a very derogatory term, and it's meant to be offensive. It's used in a lot of jokes. It's used in banter. It's really disgusting. And one thing that I've been able to do throughout this time is to actually have conversations with my parents about this issue. I've never really seen too much discriminatory behavior among my parents. I've definitely seen it in my extended family. But we are privileged, even as Muslim people of color who aren't African American. We are so privileged, so much more privileged than Black people of color. And it's important for us to recognize that, and it's important for us to understand that we will never understand their experience. And so I think that the Muslim community definitely needs to kind of listen and amplify Black voices, give Black people an actual platform, give them a chance to actually voice their concerns instead of us, you know, jumping on the wagon and taking over all the time. Because I think that's something that happens a lot. even when we're dealing with issues for the Black community. So like Nadia and Juwaria said, I definitely think that it starts at an individual level where we need to start looking inside of ourselves and our families and our friends. And just like Ifat said, we need to confront people when they're doing things that are wrong and that are racist, even if they're people that we love. And so I think starting there is really important. And then we should definitely integrate that to a larger level at mosques and community centers, and be able to give Black people an actual platform for them to be able to actually talk and for us to listen.
Thank all of you so much for sharing yourselves with all of us so openly and honestly and frankly. And it's a lot to digest. I have to go back and look at the notes. I have to look at the tape and to process all of what you said. Looks like we could use another session, but I know you guys are getting ready to get busy with your college, university studies. If you're not already taking some sort of summer or distant classes, who's studying right now, taking courses?
I am.
Okay.
Literally my whole summer was filled with classes.
Okay. And the rest of you, when do you start actually back to school? And I'm assuming it's distance learning. When do you start back, Amira?
At UMD, we start late August, I think.
August, what day?
I don't have it at the top of my head.
Oh, okay. But Nadia, what about you?
Yeah, also late August.
Late August.
Yeah.
Okay. Irfan?
Likewise, brother.
Likewise. Okay. We may, if you don't mind, we may call on you again for some other forum. If you have, or similar to follow up to this, if you have any ideas or suggestions going forward, since you've had an opportunity to hear each other's point of view and ideas, I think we can build on all that was said and all that was shared today. So you know how I like to do business. If all of us were together, we'd be going to lunch or early dinner right now. But the COVID has pretty much paralyzed all of us. So I wish there were a way that we could have a bite following this, but we are kind of limited in what we can do. So with a heartfelt thank you very, very much. All of what you all contributed was precious and invaluable and immeasurable. I will share it with my friends and those who really need to know. And thank you so very, very, very much. If you have any post thoughts, please email me. You have my email address. I suggest that you all stay in contact periodically with Juwaria, and I'll say the same to her. She was my student for 3 years, and she was in the class when I taught Mona, Imam Hajj Malik, Imam Muhammad Majid's daughter, Muna, and another girl who's just graduated from, I think, Hamza Yusuf's Institute. All of them have graduated this year. And so I think I had 5 of them in class with me at the time. And Juwaria is very bright, very intelligent, very good mu'mina, just like all of you, and good mu'min like Irfan. So thank you so much. Nice seeing you all. I apologize if I did anything to harm you and ruin your lives. I know that you all are brilliant adults and studying these things in college. You might be saying, how come Brother Salah didn't teach me this? How come I'm getting exposed to this? How come I didn't learn that? So accept my apology. Good seeing you all. Give my salam to your parents. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asri inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wa sadaqa Allahu al-aliyyul azim. Wa salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Take care.
Thank you, brother.
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي